Many parents know that classical education is going to teach their student to be an excellent reader and writer. But what about math and science? What if a classical education could provide even future engineers with the secret to their success? Find out today on this Classical Academy podcast. Welcome to the Classical Academy podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Keith Bueller. I have with me in the studio today a couple of special guests, two special guests today for our second episode. We're blessed at our school to have parents from every walk of life, entertainment, ministry, real estate, law enforcement, and we have a surprising number of families working in STEM fields. Of course, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. My guests today are Mr. and Mrs. Atherton and Sarah Carty, a power couple who happen to be members of our Trinity families here. Sarah is one of our teachers. She teaches geometry, algebra, calculus, you name it, and serves as our math department chair. And Mr. Atherton Carty, her husband, works at a top-flight aerospace company here in town. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you. So, Sarah Carty, now I know you as a math teacher, and, you know, to my own chagrin, I know you as one of the students' favorites. They have often placed you above me as favorite teacher.
Keep working on it, Dr. Bueller.
I am.
You'll make it.
You set the bar high. But tell us how you got to be where you are in the field of education and in math.
Yes, so I'm a product of public education, and I'm also a product of public education teaching pipeline. They just kind of shove you into education courses and then put you in the classroom. So I actually became a teacher before I had a teaching credential. It was at a point in time when if you could breathe and had a pulse, then you were put into a math classroom. So I guess I benefited from that, and I learned really quickly how to work on my craft. And so I worked in public education for approximately 8 years, and had children, so it took time off. And about 6 years later, when we were considering how to educate our children, we discovered Trinity. And I swore when I left education that I would never go back. And yet here I am. And this job is amazing. I love being here. This classical education has just relit my fire for education. And so, yeah, this is my 6th year here at Trinity.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And Atherton, tell us, you work as an engineer and really at this point in your career as a leader of a team of engineers. How did you get to that position where you are today?
So I grew up in a small town and really didn't have that solid a foundation, I guess, of engineering, math, and science. I had kind of the basics, but I knew I was interested in airplanes, and that's kind of what set me on the path. And I was very fortunate, very blessed to be able to attend a couple of really excellent universities, which prepared me very well in the area of aerospace engineering.
Neither university or before that you had a classical education.
No,
like Sarah.
That's correct.
But they were good universities and set you up. Okay. That's
correct. And that allowed me to educate myself and garner a position with a really excellent corporation that's been my home for now better part of 20 years, and I very much enjoy my job because I get now the chance to not only work in the areas of technology but also be able to work leading teams of technologists as we take those basic principles of math and science that I learned in school and that Sarah learned in school, and we're able to apply them to very challenging problems, and then see those technology solutions be matured into solutions that can be applied and fielded, and that is very fulfilling to be able to basically see technologies birthed and then go all the way to flight. And be able to have the benefit of seeing those fundamental principles and those basics that you learn in school actually come to fruition in real life solutions and real life products.
So you've worked as an individual engineer, just working on teams, right, entry level, so to speak, all the way up to being able to see these products develop from concept to completion.
Right.
Literally take flight.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I joined the company, I was an individual contributor. I built up expertise while I was in college in aerodynamics and computational fluid dynamics, and those were the types of jobs that I was able to take on when I first joined the company. And I didn't have a lot of experience, but I was blessed to be part of terrific teams, and I honed my craft, and I was able to contribute to the teams, and then garner the opportunities to lead small teams. And from small teams, I got a chance to lead larger teams, and from larger teams, teams of teams. And that's kind of the role that I play now. I have the terrific opportunity to lead a pretty broad portfolio of different technologies from a variety of different disciplines that really are building kind of a technology pipeline, if you will, of technologies that we develop at very low TRL levels, but are also very focused on transitioning onto platforms that we build as well, and being able to see that full cycle is a very rewarding process to be a part of.
Very cool. Thank you for that. So let's kind of start at the end and work our way back to the beginning. When you hire a great employee, let's say, or the company hires a great employee and they show up on your team, what is it about them? What would you say makes a great employee?
So that interesting question, Keith. And I think that what I would say is the way I'd answer that question today is different from the way I would have answered that question right after I graduated college. The way that I was, what I believed when I was in college and graduated college was that technical excellence and scholastic achievement was really, that was kind of the high bar.
Yeah.
And it all came down to GPA.
That's right.
And it all came down to how much you know. And I believe that is a piece of the ideal mix of what makes a great engineer. Technical excellence, technical achievement is fundamental. You have to have those gifts of being able to excel in math and science. You have to be able to apply them. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of dedication. An engineering curriculum, an engineering degree is a lot of work. But what I would say is over time, what I found really makes a unique engineer that has a blend of not only that technical aptitude and background, but also other things that they can bring into the equation as well. And those other things are, I'd say, very, very fundamental, if you will, in the big picture, but maybe not so fundamental from an engineering education standpoint, which is very technology focused. Things like excellent communication skills, things like sound logic, fundamentals to be able to build a logical equation and be able to argue logical points, being able to orate and being able to speak intelligently and debate a point and understand a counterpoint and understand how that logical equation comes together. Those are all elements that come into complementing a strong technical foundation, which is still and always will be the foundation of an engineering education. But it's all these other elements that take engineers that are smart folks and absolutely are the foundation of an engineering organization and allow them to take on different roles. Allow them to broaden themselves, allow them to be flexible in the way that they grow their own careers and where they steer their own careers and the number of opportunities and options that they have as they mature as professionals.
You mentioned argument and understanding points and counterpoints. We talk a lot about discussion in a classical environment. Maybe from the outside we picture engineers sitting down coding, and if the solution works, then it works. But talk about a context in which arguing, communicating, listening, understanding the other person's point of view are just essential to what you do.
Sure. I think there's that stereotype out there, but at least the engineering environments that we try to cultivate at our company is one where there's healthy debate and there's healthy discussion, where no one person's opinion is sacrosanct, because that stifles creativity. Creativity ends up being a terrific team sport, if you will. And some of the most creative solutions come up with a lot of contributions from a diverse community of folks that bring different perspectives. But the only way that you get all those ideas on the table and get them socialized and get them heard and get them amalgamated together into an ultimate solution that is greater than any one of the individual pieces that were brought into the discussion, is to be able to have those healthy debates. And it's not about bulldozing people and running them over with speaking louder or speaking faster. It's about hearing an argument, hearing a discussion point, and internalizing that, and then building a response to that, so that as a team you can have the entirety of the discussion raised to a different level, where you're considering more of the aspects of the problem and broadening the worldview of how you're solving the problem.
So one of the first things you said was your answer to what makes a great sort of engineer is different from the beginning of your career out of college to the end of your career, or the current spot. And you know, we talk a lot about how industries are being disrupted and technology is changing and evolving. So what kinds of, skills, or would you say that the skills you're talking about, that those are more timeless, that if we cultivate communication, listening, these are almost like human skills, right? As well as the technical competence, that's actually more of a lasting job skill.
So it's interesting as the technology job space, if you will, has evolved over time. We've heard so much about startup culture, and we've heard so much about the different way that folks entering the job market today in technical fields think about their careers versus the way they would have thought about them years ago. I have a great story, I think, to add to the discussion, which is it really just happened to me last night, flying back on a work trip, and I was sitting next to a couple folks that it turns out they knew each other because they both had attended the same university in Southern California, and they were in similar groups, but they were very familiar with their sphere of acquaintances and friends. And the one was a PhD engineer, and he was talking about how he had spent years and years and years getting this PhD, but now he wanted to try to expand into other areas. He wanted to try to start his own business. And he was talking with this other individual, and she was sharing her expertise and her experience being part of that startup culture. The point being that there was a time, I think, when you would train yourself in a given trade craft, and that was kind of the one thing that you would think of doing for your entire career. But I think that the modern generation of technical professionals has a much broader worldview and much bigger aspirations for what they would like to be able to do. When they have great ideas, they want to be able to share them. When they have something that they think is a killer app or a creative solution, they want to be able to make something out of that, start a business. But that requires not only technical skill, that requires communication skill and business skill and finance and all these other disciplines that you don't think of as core to engineering, but they are core to what the new technology leader going forward in the future will be interested and will find in having and will find very useful as they go out and conquer their parts of the world.
That's fascinating. We don't want to, just from our perspective as educators, we're looking at these children's trajectory, and we don't want to set them on a trajectory that's going to be obsolete, right? We don't want to say specialize because you're going to be the top of your field. Actually, maybe the top of your field is the guy who generalized a little bit and who had different irons in the fire.
Well, I think that it's true that there's a very different formula for how you'd want to prepare yourself for a 40-year career today than what you would have done even a generation or two generations ago. As I mentioned, I think a generation or two ago, the idea is you would go and you would get an excellent degree in, say, engineering, and that degree would easily take you through a 30 or 40-year career. That body of knowledge that you learned in those 4 years in college would be all you would need. But that's not even realistic, even in today's technology job environment, much less going into the future, because a given computer science major, the languages that they're learning right now in college, the modern computing languages, may well be obsolete in 10 years, right? And so the idea of being able to harvest all you're going to need for your entire lifetime and then live off of whatever you've harvested for those 40 years is really becoming a more and more dated idea. The idea is you're going to have to learn how to plant and harvest over and over and again. You're going to have to be able to retrain yourself. You're going to want to retrain yourself. You're going to become interested in other things. Technology is going to unlock different markets and different opportunity spaces. And as that happens, there's a learning aptitude that's going to be required. And I think that's where it ties back into what classical education offers and what Trinity offers to the kids that are attending is that learning agility, that aptitude to be able to quickly adjust and evolve over time and not be stuck in that one bit of knowledge that you've harvested that you're hoping will last an entire lifetime.
So we don't really call it agility class, right? No one has flexibility class, how to adapt class, but maybe we do in a sense. In the way that we teach and the way that we learn actually might inculcate that. What would you say, Sarah, is happening naturally in the class that would result in this kind of an engineer?
Well, it's funny you mention agility class or athletics. You always get the question, when are we ever going to use this, from the students? And I've in my previous younger public education days, I probably would have jumped over fences trying to come up with answers, creative answers, and engaging the students in all these wonderful ways. But my answer now is you won't. Generally speaking, you won't. You won't use factoring or
stuff.
The quadratic formula. I mean, computers do it for you even if you didn't need it. But that aside, why do you go to the gym? That's silly. Who runs on a treadmill in real life? Who lifts free weights in real life? That's not practical either. So really what we're doing in the classroom is we're going to the gym for the brain. We talk about our sweating brains a lot in my classroom. And so the point is you do something hard, you struggle, and you build that muscle. And so the stronger your muscle is, the more agile, the more flexible you're thinking, like Atherton's talking about, so that you are more prepared and capable to teach yourself or learn something that is required for seizing the next opportunity in life.
Well, and you think about in the classical model how much mathematics was proposed as this mental formation. This is not just data that you're downloading. This is forming your mind to think a certain way. And boy, if you could become that person that can think that way, how valuable would that be? Yeah,
mathematics is I believe that it's very uniquely set up so that you're humbled every time that you do it. You try a problem, you check it, and it's wrong. It's just flat wrong. You can't add words to it or come at it from a different perspective. You're just wrong. And so you've got to get back on the horse, dust yourself off, and sweat some more to attempt to achieve the correct answer, the correct thought path, the logical way to arrive at a solution.
So the fool hates reproof, the proverb says, and the wise man loves reproof. So math reproves us and kind of shows us if we're being
with proof
fools. With proof. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
That's two puns.
I can too, Dr. Bueller.
We've achieved our contractual obligation. No more puns are allowed or encouraged on this podcast. We're going to take a break there from segment 1. We'll come back with Sarah Carty, Atherton Carty, talking about STEM and classical education.
Does science disprove the God of the Bible? Trinity Classical Academy invites you to a lecture on Monday, October 7th at 7 p.m. by Dr. Mark Phillips entitled The Two Most Important Scientific Discoveries of the 20th Century and What They Mean for Your Faith. It will be a powerful, easy-to-understand talk that will feed your mind and strengthen your faith. So mark your calendars for Monday, October 7th at 7 p.m. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to part 2 of our podcast with Atherton and Sarah Carty talking about STEM in classical education. Before we dive back in, we want to remind our listeners that you can share your thoughts with us. Contact us at podcast@trinityclassicalacademy.com or on social media at the Classical Academy Podcast. Let us know what you liked, what you want more of, ideas for future podcasts. The mailbag is open. Thanks for being with us. Sarah, I want to return to this conversation about kind of the intrinsic value of mathematics, of studying math. You said the honest answer for some people when they ask, why are we doing this? When am I going to use this? Is you may not. And yet there's something, we might say humanizing about mathematics. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, math is pretty much the language that that God created the universe with. So when you are discovering new things that formulas, let's say, that describe motion or find solutions to equations, you are really putting yourself in a humble position to and really an appropriate position in reference to the Creator. So there is definitely a humanistic aspect to it. You are willingly, actually, well, in most cases, willingly signing up to do these hard things in hopes that you will bear fruit from that. So you've got your patience and your persistence, and hopefully from that fruit, you can now take that and use that in other areas.
And we talk a lot about the usefulness of math, right? But now we're trying to think about the intrinsic value. What about the beauty of math? You hear that talked about a lot in these classical texts. How can we recapture that, even for people who don't consider themselves math people?
So sitting around, I think, and trying to solve problems in a textbook is kind of pedantic sometimes. So really, you want to capture the beauty, the excitement of when you achieve a proof and it looks amazing and you want to share it. I think of my students last year. We were working with Euclid, and part of their final exam was they needed to construct several of the theorems from the first couple books of Euclid, and they had to be constructed perfectly. I told them no eraser marks. They had to be perfect. And I remember the students were turning these into me, and several students said, "I am so proud of this. I am so excited. I love the way this looks." And so there's something intrinsic about that. I couldn't teach that to them. They realized that is something beautiful, worthwhile to do. And they acknowledged that they did it, and they did it on their own. It wasn't spoon-fed to them. They didn't sit around and try and find a solution to a problem or follow an algorithm to solve a problem. They created something that was just truly beautiful.
That's amazing. And to have something they can be proud of that they created, that they don't want to just take home and toss away, is really a gift. Atherton, you're now on two sides of this. You're in engineering, but you're also a dad, and so you've got kids in a classical school. Have you seen any fruit that's already coming to be in your children that you're excited about? What's working?
I think that when Sarah and I talked about the boys attending a Trinity and her returning to teaching as an educator. As you might guess, with her being a trained mathematician and myself an engineer, we have a fairly geeky household, and that's something we're happy with, right? But I think that coming back to some of the earlier discussion points that we were hitting on earlier on, what I'm interested in is my children being well-rounded professionals. What I would say is I'm trying very hard not to steer them in the direction of any particular field when they decide what they want to do with their lives. But if they become engineers, if they become mathematicians, I would want them to be well-rounded not only in the technical aspects, but also in all of the other aspects of logic and communication and rhetoric and all of these different elements that are going to make them more complete people, more complete human beings, more complete professionals in whatever profession that they decide to pursue.
And Sarah, do you want to comment on that? Like, how do you see your boys sort of entering into this classical formation already?
Well, I'm thrilled that we're able to have them have a crossover or a continuation of Sunday during the week. We didn't want to have school during the week and then Sunday be the day that you go see your church friends and you're just doing the churchy thing. We really wanted to see that life is not made up of bits and pieces, but rather it's one holistic experience. So I hope that for them as they grow up and leave the house, that they will take that, I say spiritual aspect, but I mean that they take their faith with them, and it's there in their 9-to-5 job as well as in their family life, their home life, and their personal life.
Mm-hmm. Sunday's not just spirituality day and
right.
leave it there.
Right. It's not in a box, but it's everywhere. And so that's very important for us. And I'm seeing that's happening today. I was really thrilled. We had a freak fire alarm at school today, and my youngest told me when we got home, Mom, my buddy and I, we were outside praying in line in case something was wrong. And, it was just an accident that the fire alarm got tripped. But I was thrilled that that's what he thought of first thing off. And that wouldn't happen if we were in a public school necessarily. I don't think that Sundays would be enough time to have an instant reaction like that he did. So, yeah.
It reminds me of Dallas Willard's essay where he talks about Jesus being the smartest man, the smartest intellectual who ever lived, and the master of those who have to think. He's the master of everybody. And it just sort of is kind of puts a different spin on it. It even says, if that sounds weird to you, that's because you've been socialized to compartmentalize, and that's not healthy. I want to talk about maybe people who are successful in STEM, who get this vision. I think of Elon Musk's school. He started the school Ad Astra, which is kind of for his kids and some other kids, and it's just very science and technology focused from day one. Throw out some of those things that can be replaced by computers, like translation. And there's something tempting about that model, but at the same time, I wonder, Atherton, if you've seen this kind of a thing where somebody gets so focused on their career in STEM, and maybe they're good at their job, but they're ultimately unsuccessful as people in these other areas. They don't have time for a prayer life. They don't have time for family, for friends. They don't have other competencies. Have you seen this, and how do we avoid that?
Sure. So I think we see it all the time. Engineers in general always get stereotyped as very introverted and terrible communicators. What's the joke? I met a very extroverted engineer the other day. He wasn't looking at his own shoes; he was looking at the other person's shoes.
Oh, nice!
Right, and that there's some truth to that, right? There's a safety and security and a confidence that comes from internalizing, your technical knowledge. But I think the bottom line is that we live in a world filled with people, and we live in an ever expanding world that's ever connected, of people connecting with people. So I would say that communication is unavoidable, and it's an area that if you can develop a real excellence, a real knowledge, a learnedness of what the greats of the past have written and have thought, and build your own thoughts on top of those, it can make you more excellent at whatever you do. So I'm a fan of Elon's school, just because I think that it puts STEM in a light of being something to be focused on. But I think that the risk you run is, if you think that it is all about STEM, you're fooling yourself. Mm-hmm. Because STEM in and of itself, technology, all the technological know-how you might have that you may have, still is going to have to be conveyed to human beings, right? You're still going to have to be able to make logical arguments. You're still going to have conversations. If you have the greatest idea in the world, but you can't explain it to anyone, then no one's going to understand what you're talking about, right? And the one other piece I would add is that I think that it's some of the pieces that Sarah was talking about, as far as how she tries to train the kids in her class to push themselves, the brain sweat idea. I think humans in general are they're predisposed to fear. They fear things in their life. They fear things like math, for instance, right? And think about, if you're not one of the folks that fears math and avoids it in their own life, you certainly know someone that does, right? So one of the things that I think the school strives to, I know my wife strives to do, as she educates kids, is to build up a confidence, a fearlessness, if you will, not a cockiness to think that you know everything and you've studied for the test and there's no question that can be asked, but a confidence that no matter what situation you find yourself in, you'll be able to figure it out. You'll be able to think your way through it. You'll have the aptitude. You'll have the breadth to be able to put the pieces together. And I think what we, as a broader community, really should hope for our kids to have is that confidence. You don't want to raise kids that are entering into society fearfully. You want them to be confident. You want them to be secure in who they are and where they fit. And that's an important piece.
So you're talking about several qualities that, apply to a great engineer, but would apply more broadly, right? Communication, the ability to understand people, the ability to relate to people. And these are things that you might not think in the stereotype from the outside that actually make great engineers, but they do contribute. And as well as, confidence, poise, the having a center, knowing who you are. Yes, you have limitations.
Right.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Well, I think what you see in society today is a blurring of the lines. Again, as we talked about before, it used to be you would go off and get an education in an area, and that would be what you were excellent at, and you knew that information, and really nobody else did. But Keith, if you and I were going to have a debate on artificial intelligence tomorrow, right, and I happen to do some of this work in my day-to-day job, so I felt comfortable and confident in that area, but you didn't know, what would you probably spend this evening doing?
Reading, researching, yeah.
You'd jump online.
Mm-hmm.
You'd watch YouTube videos, right? You'd read tutorials. You'd take a Khan Academy class.
Right.
And where do you think you would be 24 hours from now?
Be pretty far, yeah.
You would be a baby subject matter expert in at least the top level of artificial intelligence, for instance. And we would have a debate where you knew nothing about it maybe before, and now we could have that conversation. The point is, you are schooled and trained at a very deep level in a completely different field than I am. But you can enter into my discipline and my field just by the accessibility of knowledge. Similarly, if I wanted to have a debate with you on literature, I could educate myself tonight and try to hold my own with you. I'm sure I'd lose the debate, but that's okay. I could at least try to hold my own. The point is, knowledge is very accessible right now, and there's the blurring of the lines. So if we think that we become excellent in a certain area, and there's some kind of barrier that keeps other people from challenging us or asking or questioning us in that area, or being able to comprehend what we're thinking, we're kind of fooling ourselves, because all that knowledge is out there. It's all available. It's being shared and evolved all the time. So the point is,
and the kind of people that can tap that, access that,
exactly.
reap and sow on their own terms, they can almost switch fields or
right.
deepen their field.
Well, and I think that's what we're seeing in kids today is not only an ability to do that, but a desire to do that, right? A desire to, I think the idea of having one career over a lifetime is something that is unappealing to your average teenager today. The idea of being able to retrain yourself and re-enter the job market, do different things is exciting, right? It's one of the things that gets kids excited about, well, my first career I'd like to do this, and my second career I'd like to do this, and then I'd like to link the two together, and I think that's the kind of thing that gets people's blood flowing. And the point is, there's opportunities to be able to do that today too. So
Sarah, just, kind of wrapping things up, thinking about how we approach education in the classroom. I know in my classroom, I try not to overly emphasize these divisional boundaries between, history, theology, philosophy. It's kind of all coming together on real topics. How do you do some of that in math where you want to make them competent mathematicians, but without over-emphasizing that, this is just math, quote unquote, and nothing else matters?
That is a great question. I think that geometry does a fantastic job of taking something that is fairly accessible, right? You need a straight edge and a compass and a pencil, and that's it. And it takes you through puzzles and logical thinking. So there's an accessibility to it, but it's hard. It's so hard to prove that what you just did. And there is certainly a need to define your terms and a need to talk about axioms, things that we all agree are true. So there's a lot of, I suppose, philosophy. You can probably speak to this much better than I can, but there's definitely some underlying philosophy when you are looking at mathematics, and definitely the skills, the communication skills. I think math is interesting because it's so precise. So every word that you read in a mathematics textbook means something very valuable. You can't gloss over any word. Every little article is important.
And if you're collaborating with your peer at the table, you can't say the thing over there needs to connect with this thing over here. You have to speak precisely.
Right. We avoid pronouns at all costs.
It.
It is.
Which is it?
They.
They.
They are it. Yes.
Mm-hmm, those things. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. So I want to thank you guys for sharing some of your thoughts and your expertise with us. Power couple indeed. It's true. It was confirmed. Really appreciate it. Would love to talk more. We're going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining us on the Classical Academy podcast, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
And thank you for joining us again on the Classical Academy podcast, presented by Trinity U, a service of Trinity Classical Academy here in Santa Clarita, California. I'm your host, Dr. Keith Bueller. Our producer is Shay Ramquist. Our audio engineer is Stephen Petrie. Until next time, keep on educating yourself.